Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Suzette Bravo. Suzette is an empowerment coach. She's working with women and young ladies. She's an author and she's got a new podcast called Bravo Unscripted. She's focusing on heart centered leadership, resilience, authenticity, and self love. Enjoy my conversation with Suzette Bravo. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Suzette Bravo. Suzette is a coach, an empowerment coach. She's working with a lot of women. She loves to focus on heart-centered leadership, resilience, authenticity, and self-love. And she had a very interesting life that led her to that today. She's also a podcaster. She has a new podcast called Bravo Unscripted. And she's also wrote a book called Becoming You. Basically, we're going to talk about self-development. We're going to talk about women leadership. We're going to talk about life. Suzette, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for the conversation. We were just talking, I think it's been like 6 years since we've seen each other. So it's really great to reconnect.
Absolutely. And we met in a charity which is helping families of law enforcement and first responder.
Yes. Yeah, the Advisory Council. They're an amazing organization supporting first responders, police officers. Yeah, it's a really great group.
It is. And I knew you from that. And then now I see that you have a podcast. Oh, how interesting. But my first question is, what is your journey and how did you get to that?
Oh boy, that's such a great question. My journey and the work that I am doing now with women and girls was kind of born of the fact that I'm showing up in a space to kind of support the woman that I used to be and the girl that I used to be. And when I was growing up, there was a lot of trauma in my childhood. I really struggled, especially through high school, well into my 20s. I tell the story that my freshman year of high school, I finished that year, an entire year of school without one single credit. And it was primarily because I wasn't going to school. And if I was in school, I was high, I was drinking a lot, and I was just rebelling against life in general. And I really could have used, one of the programs that I'm really involved in is Pace Center for Girls. And they work a lot with, they call them at-risk girls. I prefer the term at-promise girls. But, knowing how much something like that would have meant to me growing up has been really important. So I got through high school, actually by some miracle, managed to graduate on time and kind of went along in my life, and things were well. I mean, I was doing really well. I was highly functioning. I never, it took me a long time to deal with the trauma that I had come through. I had just kind of buried it all and was pretending it wasn't there. And I was married to an amazing man. We've been together for about 17 years. And in January of 2013, he was diagnosed with an aggressive stage 4 glioblastoma brain tumor, and he passed away 8 days later.
8 days, wow.
8 days, yeah. And it was like nothing prepares you for that. Nothing in your life prepares you for that kind of loss and that kind of really deep kick in the gut. So what happened when I was going through the grief and the loss of that is it brought up everything. It brought up everything that I had sort of buried over my lifetime. And I was really forced to deal with all of it. In that, it was a gift because I finally sort of healed a lot of the things from my past, forgiven myself, forgiven others. But really, I guess about a year and a half after he passed, I started really embarking on this journey. And I first embarked on the journey of self-development, which is really amazing. I'm a huge fan of self-development. But at the same time, when you're struggling with an I'm not good enough mindset, it can also be challenging to navigate this world that just keeps telling you one more event, one more book, read this, do this, then you'll be good enough. So as I started to move through that, and then I moved into some significant therapy with a really amazing trauma-informed therapist, and just really starting to kind of open up and get to know myself and allow the things that had come up over the years, the grief that I was feeling, I finally had to turn and face and start feeling all of these things. And as I was moving through it, I had always been very quiet about what had happened to me as a child. And
Mhm.
I never really talked about the trauma because there was a lot of shame around all of that. But I started opening up a little bit and I started talking to women about my story. And what I found when I did that was I was amazed at the number of women who were like, oh my gosh, me too. Like, and then they would share their story. And I could see, the reflected kind of back from them. I mean, the mirroring and like the sharing of the story and finding a space where it's okay to be vulnerable is really, really powerful. So I realized that in all of our stories and everything we've all been through, there's beautiful gifts in that. And when we connect to other people and we share and we build those connections with people, there's very powerful healing in that.
Absolutely.
So that sort of brought me to deciding to be a coach, embarking on that journey and the education and the training and the certifications and all of that. And I was working with women primarily at first, and then a couple of the women that I was working with were like, "Oh, well, would you mind? Could you talk to my daughter?" And that hit me. I was like, "Okay, so if we can start educating them at that point, junior high, high school, then they're not unwinding 30 years of toxic behavior down the road." So that's kind of, in a nutshell, my journey to bring me to where I am today. And it's
That's
something
amazing.
that,
And what I like in your story is that you actually took action.
yes. Listen, there was a lot of resistance around it for a long time. Taking action is a big step. We can formulate all of these ideas around how we want to do things. But one of the lessons I learned through all of this, because I've always been an overthinker, I can overanalyze anything.
Mm.
But what I found is the answers come to us through action more often than not. We can formulate an idea in our head, but it's not until you take that action that you actually see how things are going to play out. And that's where the answers often are.
Absolutely. When I feel sometimes down, and I figure out that the two best way to get out of it is or helping someone, or the other option is actually to do things and to take action, and things are moving.
Yes. And I love the response that you gave there too about helping someone else, because that's often like, we get mired down in our own story and our own feelings. And the power in helping somebody else and the power in raising somebody else up can pretty much bring you out of just about anything.
Totally. There was not a lot of discussion about being vulnerable until, I would say, Brené Brown
Hmm.
did her TED conference, and it became now a thing. So what was happening before that? Where were the needs, and who was helping people before that?
I would say a lot of healing and a lot of conversations were probably going on behind closed doors. It used to be the map was, you go see a therapist and you sought out psychiatric help and nobody talked about it.
Mhm.
And I love that we've come around to this space where it's okay. It's okay not to be okay. And it's
Right.
okay to talk to your friends. It's okay to talk to a therapist or have a coach or through your church or your family, whatever connects to you,
Mhm.
because there is something so powerful in being vulnerable. And at the same time, though, I believe we need to be discerning about where we're vulnerable. Because the other thing you see a lot of is people sharing things in an inauthentic way. And that's not always super helpful either. But, I love that mental health is coming to the forefront because, life is hard. Being a human is hard. And we've all faced challenges and we've all had to overcome things. And I think it's really beautiful that the world is starting to create a space for that.
Absolutely. And I remember in March 2020, when this thing called pandemic started hitting, I put together a webinar which is called "You're Not Alone" for people in the meetings and event industry. But the reason I'm mentioning that is that one of the person that came on board, and she's been on the podcast as well several times, Dr. Sherry Walling, who was talking about mental health and the importance of taking care of oneself. And it's fascinating to me, and I would say it's one of the silver lining for me of the pandemic, that actually people now are much more aware of the importance of mental health, and it's not taboo anymore to discuss that in a business setting.
Right. And, one of the things also that came out of the pandemic, with everybody being shut down, and I love, there's so many new ways for us to connect to each other that came out of the pandemic. That's actually one of the gifts that happened. But, one of the struggles, and a lot of people are still facing it, is the loneliness aspect and people feeling like they're alone and they don't have somebody that they can turn to. And I don't remember the exact statistic right off the top of my head, but they put loneliness, the dangers of loneliness, up there with the dangers of smoking on your health. And, that's pretty significant. So yes, opening up this world and allowing people to step forward. And one of the pillars that I coach on a lot, and I work with women and girls because it is such a huge problem, is this concept of self-love, which believing in yourself and loving yourself is often the foundation for everything else in your life that you will do. Because it doesn't matter what you're trying to do. If you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe that you're worthy of achieving, and you don't believe that you're worthy of what you're going after, sabotage will set in.
Yep.
Because if your subconscious is running on this belief that you don't deserve that, you can't have that, it doesn't matter how hard you're trying, you will sabotage yourself. So coming into that space, and mental health is a huge part of that, and believing in yourself and loving yourself enables you to step forward in the world in a much more powerful way. It makes you a better spouse, a better friend, a better leader, all of those things. It shows up in your business, it shows up in your personal life, it shows up in your family. But that is the foundation to which everything else is built.
Agree. And is it also something that we can link to growth mindset, like the book that Carol Dweck wrote years ago? For me, if you don't love yourself, then there's no growth that can really take place.
Right. Yeah, because again, like, you can do all the things. And this is where I think people get stuck in some of the self-development. Like, they talk about words of affirmation. Well, if you don't believe them, you're just blowing smoke. Because if you're standing in the mirror saying, I'm beautiful, I'm amazing, I'm wonderful, but your mind is like, no, you're not. Like, So it comes down to that repairing your relationship with yourself. And so many people I see looking externally for feedback in their life, looking for their worth in external validation. And external validation is shaky ground at best.
Yes. You're basically leaving to the opinion of others the fact that you can be happy or not.
Right. And the problem with that is we have no control over other people. And other people see the world through their lens of the world, which is different from our lens. So nobody sees things the same way that we do. There's 8 billion people on the planet right now. So there's 8 billion versions of reality running around at any given time.
Yes.
So when your worth comes from an external source, internally, that that's not valid.
When you are faced with women or with girls that are reminding you of past trauma, being a coach, you cannot tell them you should do this, you should do that. So how do you cope with that? And how do you guide them into understanding their situation and seeing the different options?
Yeah, part of my own growth through my coaching journey has been to deal with my own triggers, because it can be very challenging when I'm working with somebody who's been through something very similar. And there's a lot of personal work that goes into being able to kind of separate myself from that at times. And because again, everybody's journey is different. I may be working with a woman who's going through something very similar to what I went through, but her experience and her results and how she feels about it are going to be very, very different. So I tend to take an approach of asking a lot of questions, because you can be talking to somebody and you can share your experience. You can share insights.
Right.
I prefer to ask questions and guide them to their internal dialogue and what feels right for them. Because a lot of times, especially when you're dealing with women and girls that have been through trauma, one of the results of trauma is dissociation. We tend to separate from ourselves. It's a method of protection. I tell people, like, I got so good at this, I could literally kind of just separate myself from my body. Like, they're completely two different entities. And it's a survival mechanism. It's how you get through it. As an adult, when you're safe and you're taking care of yourself, it no longer serves you. So asking questions and helping women and girls come back to themselves and get back into their own bodies and getting back in touch with their own intuition and how they feel about things, because it's that internal intuition, and I'm sure you've felt it many times in business, that drives our best decisions.
Yeah. I was thinking about the book that you wrote, Becoming You.
Yes, I'm actually one of the contributing authors in that book.
Okay.
Yeah.
What triggered the will to write, and what was the experience?
It was a really great experience. And it's interesting because I am working on writing my own book, my own story, which can be really intimidating to think about at times. So a dear friend of mine, Wendy Bloom-Weiss, is actually one of the co-authors. Her and Patricia put the book together. So when her and I were talking one day and she was telling me about this project, I was like, okay, well, this sounds like a really great opportunity to kind of dip my toe in the water and sort of test the waters and see the process and get familiar with it. And so I jumped on the opportunity. The other women who also provided chapters in the book, every story in there is profound and beautiful and just so inspiring. And so now, kind of coming out of that experience, writing the book, telling a little bit about my story, going through the process of, you write something that's really deep and heartfelt, it goes to an editor. So they kind of come back with yes or no.
Yep.
You got to develop a little bit of a thick skin there. And then, going through how the whole thing works and then promoting the book and learning about that. So now the prospect of me writing my own book is much less frightening. So I'm super excited. I'm back to working on my own book.
Which is going to be about what?
It's going to be a deeper dive on my story and some of the lessons that I've learned over my life. It's also going to be about self-love and self-leadership and how that self-love will drive, especially women leaders and women in business and entrepreneurs, like how you lead a team, how you lead your family, how you lead your life. When you're leading from a space of self-love and making decisions from that space for your life, you're going to be making better decisions in general.
I'm listening to you and it reminded me 2 years ago. Well, last year I published a book that I wrote for my daughters, why we left anti-Semitic Belgium and Europe 10 years ago and came to America. But I wanted to be a legacy for them. But then I realized that so many people were asking questions that, I'm going to publish it. So if they want to read it, great. If they don't want to read it, great as well. But at least it's there. But the reason I'm mentioning that is some of the part related to my youth where I had some traumatic experience, it was cathartic to write about it, although difficult. And I'm glad I did it as well in the process. And that's something maybe that will resonate with you.
Yes, very much so. When I first got the idea to write a book and I sat down and started writing out some things, I definitely got triggered. I sort of had to put the whole project away for a while and dig into some of the things that came up. So yeah, in the same way, it was very cathartic. It's been very healing. And it's been a great journey because I see things now through a very different perspective, obviously, than I saw them as a child. And, been able to heal so much within myself. And also, what I'm so passionate about is being able to go out in the world. And, you use the word legacy, and I love that because, like I said, if there's anything that we can take out of the struggles that we've had in our lives, anytime that we can take those struggles and those struggles can benefit somebody else, it makes them just not better, but it changes. Right. It changes how you look at it and it changes what it means to you.
Absolutely. Is that also the reason why you decided to do the podcast, so you can speak and share what you think with more people?
Well, it's not even, the podcast is not even about bringing my voice forward. It's about all of the people that I know that have really amazing things to share and have come through their own storms in their life and have wisdom and beauty and depth and bringing their stories to the world and connecting more and more people. Because it is about starting a movement, and it's about keeping this movement going where we connect with people who have, whose lives are very different, but we see bits of ourselves in them. And it just creates like this great tapestry, I think, as we weave all of these things together, and there's healing in all of it.
And for those listening, your podcast, it is called Bravo Unscripted.
Yes, Bravo Unscripted. It's a new podcast. It's funny. I was laughing this week as I was writing the show notes for this one. And I was like, every week I'm writing, oh my God, I'm so excited about this guest. And then I kind of sat with that. I was like, because I am. Like, I'm genuinely loving the podcast because I love these conversations that I get to have with these incredible people.
That's awesome. And as you know, the podcast is a format, but unfortunately cannot take many hours unless you're Joe Rogan, of course, which is a different story.
Right.
But can you tell us before we end today, but can you tell us about those organizations you're part of that is helping a lot of women and a lot of young ladies as well?
Yes, the two organizations I'm primarily working with right now are Pace Center for Girls. They're all throughout the state of Florida. They are an alternative school and counseling center for, like I said, the term is at risk, but I don't like that. But, they're girls that have had issues, had trauma, had, whatever has shown up in their lives and presented challenges for them. And it's I got introduced to PACE about 6 or 7 years ago. And from the moment I walked in their doors, just the energy there, how they show up and support the girls. One of their taglines is find the great in every girl, which I love because they focus on the great in all the girls that are there because they all have it. They've just been through stuff that is temporarily dimmed who they're going to be in the world. And the other organization, and I'm just now starting to get involved with them, but I really love them. It's called Women of Tomorrow. And they have, successful professional women mentoring girls in high schools. And they've served over 30,000 girls over the years. I think she was saying last night the organization's been around for 26 years. A dear friend of mine actually turned me on. She's been a mentor for them for about 3 years. But those of you from South Florida may be familiar. Jennifer Valapi, she used to be a newscaster. She is one of the co-founders of the organization.
Is it only in Florida or is it nationwide?
It's only in Florida. And I think there's one other state. And I apologize for not knowing that. But
no. Wonderful. Suzette, thank you so much for spending some time with me today and sharing all the great work you're doing. How do people get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. My website is my name, SuzetteBravo.com. You can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn, Suzette K. Bravo, middle initial K. And you can email me at Suzette@SuzetteBravo.com. So my podcast is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So if you are doing something extraordinary, or you know somebody who's doing something extraordinary, and by extraordinary, I mean ordinary in the most extraordinary way. It can be as simple as I've had guests, that are in recovery, that have started not-for-profits. I mean, all over the place. So, but if you've got a story to tell, please reach out. I'd love to hear it.
Wonderful. Suzette, thank you so much. I hope we won't wait another 6 years to see each other. And I wish you the best of luck with your podcast and all the coaching program you're having for women.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Suzette, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. Truly enjoy our conversation and congrats on all the great work you're doing. And once again, your podcast has just launched. It's called Bravo Unscripted for those who want to listen to. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please go on LinkedIn or join the Facebook group www.eventbusinessformula.com/group. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.